Mark, this is the highlight of the day where we get to talk, and the problem is I can't think of anything I'm going to disagree with you about.
Isn't that frustrating? I have the same problem when if I was going to interview you. I'm not aware of anything we've done. Well, actually, we disagree just a tad. I think that you're probably a tad more pessimistic than I am. It seems like you're a little more enthusiastic about watching the collapse from afar. I see the collapse as a like they talk about in Phoenix, sort of the rebirth from the ashes, that we got a decent opportunity here to get at some kind of critical mass here, to maybe say, hey, that didn't work. Trusting government, looking to the government for solutions to problems that the government has largely created, that didn't work so well. Maybe we ought to try a free society again, and I think we have a good case for that now. So,
yeah, well, you think the Europeans might have figured that out after a century of wars and socialism, but they're getting worse, not better. So I'm not completely convinced that people actually learn from their mistakes.
You know, Doug, I think that there really is a good case for optimism here. And I agree these are baby steps. And I say them with a little hesitation. But just look, for example, and consider the fact that we've been evolving for 3 million years. We got really fast change, technologically speaking, right now, unprecedented in the history of humanity. Things like, take torture, for example. Torture, you don't have to go back too far to get to a time when torture was widely accepted. Torture was pretty, and not to say that we still have...
It was SOP.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was at the Tower of London not too long ago, and here's the dungeon, here's where the rack was. I mean, that's just what happened. We still have torture today. We still have people getting their heads chopped off. But by and large, the world community, humans, where we are on the evolution scale right now, we generally look at that as a community and say, you know, we don't like that anymore. We're not in favor of that. We prefer due process. We prefer more sort of civilized ways of resolving things. I look at that and I take some optimism from that. And the other day I was sitting in court. You know, although I despise many of the substantive criminal laws we have, I think about our criminal procedure. And I think about the fact that we do a pretty good job with our evidence rules, with having a fair trial. I mean, you and I could probably agree on 85 to 90% of the things that happen during the course of a trial. The way we resolve a dispute, we pick people out of the community. Both sides get a pretty reasonable opportunity to ask them questions. People who are obviously biased, we throw out. We ask them if they can follow the law and all these things. Both sides get a full, fair hearing. As a defense attorney, I get to bring witnesses in. My guy doesn't have to testify. I can put evidence in. The evidence rules generally are calculated to keep out things that are unreliable, let things in that are reliable. And you know, like I said, I did a national high-profile trial in this Elizabeth Johnson case, sometimes referred to as the Baby Gabriel case. And I enjoyed standing there in front of the jury and saying, look, it's just me and you. I get to speak on behalf of my client. There's no bureaucrat. The judge isn't here controlling things. It's just me and you citizens talking about what ought to happen to another citizen. Those rules are pretty good, and they evolved over a long period of time. So there are things about our society that are worthy of praise and recognizing that we've accomplished as humans. I think we're doing better in lots of areas. Look, you and I were talking about legalizing marijuana 20 years ago. We were complete nuts just for that.
Yeah.
We're still seen as complete nuts, but not for that anymore,
yeah.
Right? I mean, we could say legalize marijuana. Most people now, I say most because Gallup did a poll that was over 50% now, say at least marijuana, or said in our terms, they recognize that individuals have a right to control at least this one substance that goes in their body. And as I talk to marijuana groups, those are usually the most hostile talks that I give. They think that I'm coming in as a friend, but I'm not. And I attack them because I don't want to talk about medical marijuana. I don't want to talk about the economic benefits. What I want to talk about is this is a great opportunity now to make the argument that individuals, competent adults, really ought to control what goes into their body.
And you get arguments on that from the marijuana groups.
I get probably about 50%. You know, today, if you recall, I talked about in my speech how unimpressed I am with people who smoke marijuana and are for legalization of marijuana. That doesn't mean you're for freedom at all. That just means you're for what you want to do, which I understand. But that I exclude those people from the people in the category I put are really for freedom. I mean, because as you know, the non-marijuana smoker who supports the rights of people to smoke marijuana, that means something to me. So I really attack them on this, and I think I've made pretty good progress with trying to get them to steer that argument away from the sufficient arguments about economics and things of that nature to the better argument that individuals should have a right to control bodies. And I think, look, if we can win that argument, we make dramatic progress on the freedom argument overall. So yes, I see the state failing in all areas, but that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. I look at that and take away optimism from that, and I see people, as they say now, the new libertarian middle, because I think that, look, a lot of the old school Democrats who liked things like civil liberties, they're uncomfortable with the constant surveillance and spying and things. And, you know, the Democrats of today have no connection whatsoever, even to those civil liberty-minded Democrats. And then the old school Republicans, the Barry Goldwaters, dare I even put Ronald Reagan in that category, who just thought the government ought to be a little smaller than it is, or the market ought to be a little freer than it is. Today's Republican has no connection to even that concept. So we can do a lot to appeal to that old school Republican, and I think we do. And you're seeing it with Rand Paul, who goes out and gives speeches at Berkeley and gets a great reception from them on, he's more liberal than the liberals on liberal issues.
It's true, although he's really very wishy-washy and political about almost everything, which makes me very suspect of him from a matter of principle. But I want to go back to your, and I agree with everything you said. We don't, like I said, we don't disagree on anything. But about trials and so forth, and the jury system. And it's been said that you don't want to be tried or judged by anybody that's too stupid to get out of jury duty. So by the time a juror passes the voir dire process, where if he has any kind of out-of-the-box ideas or thinks for himself, one attorney or the other will root him out, and he doesn't have anything better to do than sit on a jury. Who are these people that sit on juries today?
Well, look, I think, honestly, I think it's error to say that the people on the jury are just people who are too stupid to get out of jury. I'd love to be on a jury.
Oh, I would too.
Oh, there you go. I mean, we.
Yeah, but you and I are not a statistically valid sampling of the U.S. population, I'm sorry to say.
No, but just because we agree on other things, in other words, I don't think everybody needs to agree with us completely on everything to still say, I'd really like to be on the jury for one reason or another. It's not everybody who just wants to get out. Some people maybe want to get out of their work for a while. Other people are interested and intrigued by the process. Other people think it's their obligation. Look, I would get on a jury because
you'd never pass the voir dire process.
I probably wouldn't, but
okay. Neither would I.
But I'd make
so
the
that's
state.
The other thing.
I'd make the state use a strike on me. I'd at least give the defense that advantage. And of course, you know, my position would be more a function of what the charge was. I could easily convict somebody if I thought the evidence was there on a real crime. I would never convict somebody on a fake crime, no matter what the evidence was. And of course, I think I made that case when I was a judge. I wouldn't preside over their cases.
Well, how about this, though? Rather than have a jury chosen from your supposed peers, whoever they may be, and I question whether anybody is judged by his actual peers on a jury, perhaps it would be wiser to have a professional juror, someone who's chosen based upon the intelligence and the fairness and the speed of his judgments. Would that be better to have professional jurors, do you think?
I suspect if you and I keep talking long enough, we'll find something to disagree on, but it's not going to be this point, because I've said on many occasions I'd prefer to have professional jurors. I think it makes a lot more sense. And I'm speaking now with my hat on as a citizen. my citizen hat, I'd prefer to have a juror who understands the nuances of mens rea, intentional acts, reckless, negligent, because I spend a long time talking about those things as well as the burden of proof. Sometimes I think their eyes are glossing over, they don't quite understand, they're acting under what we lawyers call a preponderance. Who do I believe more? And I've got to stand there in front of the jury and say, even if you believe the state more, we should still win, unless you can say with 100% certainty you are 100% free of all reasonable doubts. And I like to say it like that, but we spend a lot of time. As a lawyer, frankly, there are cases I'd rather have people who are uneducated and don't understand things because I'm making a defense for somebody.
Of course.
But as a lawyer in the current system with unjust laws, I might prefer to have an uneducated juror. I might prefer that because, look, here's another issue. And the reason I said I think 85%, there are a lot of things I would change about the system. I do like jury nullification. I would like to be able to stand in front of the jury and say, look, even if you think that the government's proved this case beyond a reasonable doubt, all elements, you can still come back with a not guilty. I can't quite say that today. I could get disbarred, I could have other problems. But there again, I think if you can get to a just society, many of these problems evaporate. Like, for example, jury nullification.
Now that's a good one, because is it true you could get disbarred for proposing this to a jury nullification?
Yeah, and indeed, to get on a jury, you got to take an oath to follow the law. If you display any unwillingness to follow the law, and we see this sometimes when we pick juries, especially we call them death-qualified juries now in death penalty cases. If you show any hesitation, if you say, look, I'm philosophically against the death penalty or something like that, I won't do it, you're gone. There's an argument for that as well. I mean, if you had a just law, if the laws were just, you'd want people following the law. The problem today is, and this is the big problem in the justice system, and as I've said on many occasions, you can tinker with the procedure all you want. You could do a 100% perfect job at getting people who are really guilty convicted and people who really are not guilty acquitted of fake crimes. It doesn't matter. The fact that you really are guilty of a stupid crime like possession of marijuana doesn't give me any comfort at all. But if we could fix that, then it's like my point today during my speech. We make a distinction between the law enforcement officer and the peace officer. We wouldn't need to do that in a just libertarian society. I wouldn't be the least bit bothered by the worst, most strict law enforcement officer who's following every libertarian-approved law possible. That doesn't bother me a bit.
Well, let's go further than that, because I've argued for years that at most we only need 2 laws. You know what they are. Do all that you say you're going to do, and don't aggress against other people or their property. That keeps it very simple.
Yep. Yeah, there's several ways to express it. Some people say the criminal law ought to be just no trespass and no fraud. But really, you could look at fraud as a form of trespass and simplify it all down to there. And the contract stuff, as you point out, do what you say you're going to do, is really a civil matter, and they can be enforced not by government courts, but by private arbitrators. Many of these problems disappear. I mean, we could make a long list of the problems that would not exist in a free society. So we don't have to solve those problems.
Well, the state creates most of these problems. In fact, I'd even go further. I like to keep things simple, and even 2 laws might be too many. So I've simplified it down to 1 great law, and that is the whole of the law should be, do as thou wilt, but be prepared to accept the consequences. And I think that would encourage responsibility on the part of people before they did something.
You know, what's so nice about small free societies is you can have little experiments. And there are lots of things like that. You know, I'm very careful to say, as a libertarian, I mean small L, philosophical libertarian, and I'm not a member of the political party, and I don't do anything in politics.
No, that's a toilet bowl for people that can't make it in the big parties.
Yeah, you know, and I've said for a long time, what matters is what's in the hearts and minds of people. That's what I try to focus on. And I'm not a utopian. I don't think that just because everybody adopts this sort of non-aggression principle, that's going to resolve all of our issues. We have countless issues and this is fun sometimes when you get in a group of libertarians raising all these questions to get the libertarians to disagree on what ought to be the rule in the community. And there isn't a right answer. There's probably 20 or 25 things. This would be a fun conference sometime to raise issues that libertarians would very strongly disagree on and get them to disagree, really to just make the point that it's nice to have sort of an anchor principle, don't initiate force, but that leaves open a huge pile of things that there's no right answer to, and you just have to try them out in different communities and see which one you like, and you may have completely different rules in different communities, but I can live with that system just fine.
Yeah, I understand. Now, of course, you're best known as a lawyer, but it's not the only hat that you wear. You also have been, and will be again, a talk show host. So how are you going to direct that talk show? Because I think it's going to be a great show.
Well, we've got some competing interests there. On one hand, there are people who want me to do a strictly criminal law type of a show, where people would call in and say, hey, Mark, I got a question. Can the police do this or that? Or, hey, Mark, I got a question. I'm currently charged with this particular crime. Here are the facts. What do you think? And I might say, well, your lawyer should be doing this, that, or the next thing. And there's a group of people who think that might be an interesting show. The other competing interest is really the freedom aspect of things. I like to bring people on. I've had in the past Sheriff Joe Arpaio on. I bring in the elected county attorneys and various people who, I enjoy people who I disagree with much more than people
How'd you get along with Sheriff Joe?
You know, actually, it was very interesting because I think there was an over-under of how long Joe would stay for the hour, maybe a half an hour or something like that. But as it turned out, this guy is really a good politician. It was clear to me at the end of that hour why he is constantly reelected. This guy really knows how to work the room and work people, and he does have a very endearing type of a personality. Of course, was completely evasive. I would ask him questions like, hey, Sheriff Joe, how do you personally feel about the drug war? Do you think we ought to end it? And his response would be, whatever they change the law to is how I'll conduct myself. If they change the law, I'll enforce it. If they change this, then I'll enforce that. I said, no, but Joe, how do you feel? I'm going to enforce whatever the law is. I'm the sheriff. And I said, but Joe, how do you feel? So we went round and round, and he wouldn't get, because he's a savvy politician. We don't want to offend this group or that group. We want to be everybody's best friend. And that's how politics works. And it's sad. Look, it's sad that you and I can't stand up and say, look, all President Barack Obama's doing is being Santa Claus, right? He's coming up and saying, I know, how about free health care, or free this, or free that, or don't worry, we'll make it easy. You know, I have thought, just as a kind of a fun experiment, it would be interesting to get up there as a politician and say, here's what I'm going to do. And you got to do this with a straight face. You say, here's what I'm going to do. I think to get the economy going and to have a stimulus package, I'm going to issue a tax credit in the form of a check, $25,000 for every American citizen. So if you're for a household of four is going to get a $100,000 check. I take over office on this day, and 3 months after that, everybody's going to receive their stimulus checks. And of course, you cover it up with, well, we think it's going to really get the economy moving again, and we'll collect that revenue on taxes times 10 and blah, blah, blah. I think I could get elected on that platform.
I think you could, actually.
Who wouldn't vote? I mean, we know some people who understand how these things work wouldn't, but that's the 3%,
well,
right?
And right now, $25,000 is probably, that's like a credible number. If you said 10 million, nobody believe you.
Right.
But 25, oh yeah, I could buy a car
just to
with
get
that.
things moving again, Doug, just to get the economy stimulated and out the door, and people can get their debt paid down. It'll be a wonderful thing.
The arguments that somebody like Paul Krugman could build around that would be wonderous. It'd be great. So,
by the way, can I make a point here?
Yeah.
Now look, I don't know Rand Paul. I've never spoken to Rand Paul. The only thing I know about is I know his dad, Ron Paul, who I like, and I have other people in my world who I'm friends with who allegedly have spoken with Rand Paul personally, and I'm told that Rand Paul is a really good, principled libertarian like his dad. So the question comes to my mind, is Rand just simply a better politician than his dad? I.e., willing to be a little more like Sheriff Joe Arpaio? Is Rand just a bit more willing to say, okay, I'll say this over here, I'll shade that over there for the purpose of getting elected so I can get a grander microphone to get up there and win hearts and minds for freedom? I don't know that that's what Rand is doing. But if Rand is doing that, fantastic.
Well, I'd say the chances of his being elected are someplace between slim and none, and slim's out of town. And the only way to run an ideological campaign is to be philosophically consistent, which he already is not being. So I don't have high hopes, although it's a step in the right direction, I suppose. But you know, we were talking earlier, and I thought it was very interesting what you said, especially in light of what you just said about Sheriff Joe. What would a drug dealer have answered if you asked them on your show about legalizing drugs?
You know, Doug, I don't know why more people don't ask me these questions, because, you know, there are few people in society, criminal defense attorneys who do major felony cases, who have had occasion to sit in completely candid attorney-client protected meetings, one-on-one, to ask questions of people who have committed different crimes. And I'm one of these people, and I, of course, am very interested in talking to drug dealers. I do federal cases as well. And so I talk to some, I'm not talking about little guys selling it out the back door. I've talked to some very high-level drug dealers who move big quantities, who don't even use themselves. These are businessmen, make no mistake about it. And I talked to them about the drug war. And these are very savvy people who understand economics and understand different aspects of their business as well as any businessman in any other industry understands. And so I have had occasion to talk to them about the drug war, and every single one of them loves the drug war. Not only do they love the drug war, they're savvy enough to know that when a competitor gets busted and the competitor's stash of whatever their drug is taken off the street, at least temporarily the supply of the drug in the community has gone down. And they understand enough to know that when the supply goes down and the demand stays constant, their stash is now worth a lot more. And it's a great time to step up and start selling more drugs. And so when I asked them, in fact, there were a couple of drug dealers fairly recently I had in my office, and we were talking about this. We were chuckling about how they love the drug war and how they never want it to end, and how they had a meeting, almost like an association meeting, where they came together and talked about medical marijuana in our state, and is it going to present a threat and a problem, and could it be stopped, and these types of things. And so I asked them, I said, would you mind, I'd love to have you come on my show, and I'll cover your face, we'll change your voice, we'll do whatever we got to do. And I want you to just talk about how you love the drug war, how you don't want it to end, how even higher penalties and things like that create higher risk, which gives you higher price and higher profits and all of that. Will you come on and talk about that? And at first they both said, yeah, we think we'd do that because you're 100% on the money here. We'll come and talk about that. But it wasn't too long after that, before the show happened, they said back to me, you know, we changed our mind. And I said, why? And originally I thought it was because they were worried about being apprehended or something like that, but it wasn't that at all. They came back and said, we don't want to help you make this case. It concerns us that the word gets out there that we like the drug war. And of course I say the same thing about Sheriff Joe Arpaio, right? I mean, who benefits from the drug war? Sheriff Joe Arpaio, the DEA, the people in the enforcement areas of the drug war, and the drug dealers. So I always tell, and like I say to Sheriff Joe, if you like the drug war, you are helping the drug dealers. You are doing exactly what they want. You're enabling them to make the kind of money that they want to make. You're helping the cartels. If you want to hurt the drug dealers and the cartels, well, you simply adopt a position for freedom. And that's exactly what we're going to see.
So could you get a straight answer out of Sheriff Joe when you got him off camera to answer that question? He's got to understand that. He's not a stupid guy.
He doesn't give straight answers on or off camera, but he's very good at work in the room. He gave my wife a kiss on the cheek and gave me his card. Here's my home number. If you ever need somebody protected at the jail, give me a call and this and that.
That's good.
He's everybody's best friend.
That's very smart.
But you know, you would think after all this time of dealing with politicians, Boobus Americanus would sort of figure it out. We've been hoodwinked over and over and over. Even those who voted for President Obama. If you liked what he had to say, you can't like him now.
You're like Linus with Lucy and the football. It's,
yes, right.
Again and again.
He ran as the peace guy. It was the one thing I thought, wow, this guy's talking about peace, blah, blah, blah. Maybe he really believes it. We found out wrong. George Bush, before him, talked about individual responsibility and rights and all this other stuff. And I don't see any distinction between George Bush and Barack Obama.
Just tell the people what you think they want to hear. That's all you got to do.
Mitt Romney, they talk about we didn't like Barack Obama. We wish we had got Mitt. Well, who do you think started this whole health care, socialized health care thing? It was Romney Care in Massachusetts. I mean, these guys, it's sad that nobody was there to stand up and say, I know, how about you be in charge of you and I'll be in charge of me? And maybe, and this is the discussion we need to have, because I was listening a little bit with your last guest and tinkering with things, that's not going to work.
No.
What we need to do is talk about what is the role of government. If you have a government at all, what is the role?
You're absolutely right. And I really like Steve Moore, but he's an incrementalist. And I'm afraid that Krugman is going to eat him alive because Krugman will have captured the high moral ground because they're standing on the same goddamn ground.
Well, I'm an incrementalist only in the sense that I think incrementally we can do a better job winning hearts and minds. We can bring people into our camp, the peace and freedom camp, and slowly but surely we're going to get enough critical mass. And like I said in my talk, we don't need to get everybody. We're never going to get everybody. But if we can get enough people, maybe we really can start moving in a more pro-freedom direction. Now, I don't know if that's before or after a big economic crash. I tend to think, and I'm not an economist, but I tend to think that's inevitable at this point. I really liked what you had to say about dealing with the debt. It's going to be defaulted on one way or another. We'll either be honest about it and say, you know what, everybody, we got in too deep and we're going to just default. For all those people who lent us money, sorry, but things happen sometimes and we're not paying it back. Or we'll do it dishonestly and we'll just print more money and it will be a slow default with inflation to hyperinflation, and that'll be the end. But we're not going to ever pay this back. It's just not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. Anyway, that's the world we live in at this point, and I'm really pleased that you're part of it, Mark, because you make it more honest and forthright, and with logical thinking, you can't help but solve some of these problems, if only accidentally. So I'm 100% on your side, my man.
Well, I feel the same way about you. And you're the one who hosted this conference. You made it happen. You're the reason there's a camera here. Somebody's going to listen to this talk or your speech or my speech, and there might be a light bulb that goes off in their head where they say, yeah, I really think, and this is the question, right? Can we have a legitimate, effective, honest society without beating each other over the head? There are those of us who say we could live just fine without coercing our neighbors. And then there are those in the other camp who say, no, we could never have a legitimate, a good society without beating each other over the head. If we could get a few more people as a result of your efforts, that goes in the Doug Casey column as good work by Doug Casey, to get another person who says, I think we could really get by without coercing our neighbor. And this fiction about this tremendous big government thing up there was the first point of my speech today. There isn't this big government up there. There's people bossing other people around. And so people should think in their own hearts and minds, do I need to boss anybody around? For me to feed my family and to make a living and to enjoy my life and to be an effective human being, do I need to boss anybody around via coercion? And if my argument's so bad that I can't persuade people into doing things that I think are appropriate for them to do? Or do I need to be bossed around? Am I such a pathetic human being that I need somebody telling me what to do? Which, of course, I still don't have a problem with so long as it's voluntary. I mean, if you need a master, look, if there are enough people out there in a free society, Doug, who really need a master, you and I can start a business. For a fee, we'll be your masters. You'll email us with questions about how to run your life, and we'll email you back with answers, and we'll tell you what to do. So for even those people, if you want to be bossed around, you can be.
If we were good-looking women, we could be dominatrixes from that point of view. Expand to all areas of your life. But in any event, I'm I'm certain that we'll both be cosmically and karmically rewarded in a favorable way, Mark, and I'm just tickled pink to have you here. Thank you very much.
I'm tickled pink that I was invited in the first place, and it's always good to see you.
Thanks.
Thanks, buddy.